everybody, my name is Mandy Broderick. I'm the Family and Consumer Sciences Extension Agent in Lewis County, Kentucky. Today I'm going to be covering the January recipe, the Burger Bowl. So first off, we're going to need to wash our hands. As you can see up here in the top corner, I have already done that prior to starting to record this. To start off, we are going to need to gather all of our materials. So you can see here I have a large bowl for our lettuce, a smaller bowl for our burger patties, a bowl that I'm going to serve the lettuce in. I have all of our ingredients, and I also have 2 cutting boards. So to start off, I'm going to go ahead and recommend that you take your cutting board, and if you actually place a damp towel, you don't want it to be soaking wet, but if you place like a damp towel, damp paper towel underneath of your board, it's going to keep it, as you can see, it slides around a lot right now. If you go ahead and put that under here, and you can see what happens, it won't move anymore, which is going to be great for when you're chopping vegetables because you want to make sure you're doing it safely. So to start off, I'm going to take my head of lettuce here. Now, some of you may know this, some of you may not, but it's very important to wash your vegetables before you eat them. This isn't just lettuce, this is any vegetable. So before I start chopping this, I'm actually going to head over to the sink and do that now. So for your head of lettuce, you're going to want to take it before you chop into it because most of your germs and dirt are going to be here on the outside. So what we're going to do, and I have a colander here just in case I start to drop anything, we're going to turn on some warm water. Give it a second there. So I know you can't feel it, but this water is warm. And we're going to go ahead, and we're just going to give this a good scrub. Basically, we're going to do this before we start chopping it because if we don't wash it first, any of the dirt that's on the outside of these vegetables, if we cut through with the knife, we're going to be pushing all those dirt and germs into the middle of our food, aka the portion that we're going to be eating, and we definitely do not want that. So as you can see here, I've actually gotten quite a bit of dirt off here already. So we have that, and while we are over here, place this on my clean towel, I'm also going to go ahead and wash our tomato that we're going to be using later on in the video. Once again, just give that a good scrub. Okay, so I'm going to dry these and move back over to our cooking station. Okay, so I'm back now with our freshly washed head of lettuce. So the first thing I'm going to do is, remember, you always want to make sure you're using a sharp knife. Believe it or not, dull knives are actually more dangerous than sharp ones because you're using more force and you're more likely to slip and make a mistake. So this is a very sharp chef's knife. What I like to do with the head of lettuce is I like to just go ahead and chop off the end here. Now once I do that, I'm going to move that to the side. And the lettuce should pretty much start to fall apart by itself. But you can also just go ahead and start chopping through this way. As you can see, this is a very nice knife. If you have knives at home and maybe they've become dull, over time, you can use a little blade to sharpen them. I would actually recommend doing this sooner rather than later if you haven't sharpened your knives in a while. So I'm going to go ahead, I've got my lettuce here. I've chopped it that way. I'm going to turn it this way. And I'm basically just going to go through here and make sure I'm chopping all this lettuce up because you don't want huge chunks in your salad, right? So just kind of think about how big you like your lettuce to be when you're eating a salad. You don't want a huge chunk of it. You also don't want it to be chopped super, super tiny like a taco salad, like shredded lettuce. Somewhere just in between that. Get a little bit more chopped here. Okay, and this is actually looking pretty good. So now I'm going to take my large bowl right here. And I'm going to go ahead and just use my hands to transfer this over to the bowl. This probably is the most messy portion of this recipe. Now if you can buy your lettuce pre-shredded, pre-chopped and bagged. When I went to the store, we actually didn't have any of that, which is why I was chopping the head myself. But you actually usually save some money though if you're willing to chop it up yourself. So I would recommend if you're looking to save, save a few dollars, go ahead and start chopping your own lettuce. It's not hard. You can see that took just a few seconds. But here we have our lettuce. So we're going to move on now to the next step. So you'll actually probably notice something different right away. I have switched my cutting board. On the last cutting board I was using to cut my veggies, I've just sat it to the side. Next up, we're going to be working with our hamburger, and we want to use different cutting boards, or make sure you wash your cutting board in between whenever you're dealing with vegetables and meat. You don't want cross-contamination. You don't want the juices from that meat to get into your lettuce that you're not going to cook. That's a great way to get yourself sick. So next up here, we're actually going to be working with our hamburger. So here I have a bowl. So in the recipe, it actually says to take our ground beef and our seasoning and our salt, mix it in, and just make sure you work it through here really good. So let's go ahead and start off with our salt. So we are going to need a ½ teaspoon of salt. So I have my salt here. 1/2 teaspoon. And remember, if you want more salt, we recommend trying to limit your sodium intake, but you're more than welcome to add some more if you need to. Or even if you want less, like this, you honestly might think that this recipe tastes fine with less salt, and that's fine too. So there's our salt. Okay. Next up, I have our hamburger here. And I'm just going to take that out of the package. Put it in the bowl. Now remember, before I start touching my vegetables again, I will have to wash my hands again. So I'm just taking that seasoning salt right now and mixing it through this consistently. So what we're gonna do after we get this mixed up pretty good here is we're actually gonna start to form our patties. So this recipe, you know, it doesn't have your chopped hamburger in it like your tacos, or, you know, it's not finely chopped hamburger. It's actually little bitty mini patties. So what I'm gonna do, so I've got this mixed up pretty good here. I'm not seeing any, you know, huge chunks of salt or anything. Is I'm gonna go ahead, and the recipe says to form about 15 mini patties. So I'm gonna go ahead and roll that into a ball, flatten it out into a little mini patty just like that. And I'll keep doing that until I run out of hamburger. Okay, so I've now made all my little individual burger patties. Next up, we're going to be taking these over to the stove and we're going to be cooking these in a skillet. Next up here, I have a medium-sized skillet. I have a place to put my hamburgers after they're done cooking, and I have the mini burger patties that we just patted out. So my skillet here, I know you can't tell, but it actually is warm. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start placing the first burger patties in here to cook. Now, you might not be able to fit all of your burger patties in here at once, and that is totally fine. I'm actually here probably going to be doing 2 separate batches. So I'm going to do about half of them now and then half of them after this. Put one more in here. And we'll go ahead and just let these cook. Okay, so we're now back over here. You can see that I have switched back to my green mat since we're going to be working with our veggies again. So these are the items that we're not going to be cooking. We don't want cross-contamination. After I cooked the burger patties, I did check to make sure that they were at a temperature of 160 degrees Fahrenheit. So remember, you do want to make sure that all of your meats are cooked appropriately using a food thermometer. So what we have left here to chop is a tomato and an onion. So I want to go ahead and start with the tomato. So the first thing that I like to do is I like to just go ahead, chop off that end of that you don't want, and we're just going to cut this into some slices. You do want to be careful the closer you get to the end. You don't want to be cutting your fingers. So I'm actually going to stop that there, and I'm going to start cutting it this way. And I'm going to turn the whole batch again, chop one more time this way. So what I've basically done is I've cut these tomatoes into tiny little cubes by doing this. So you can actually see these are now in little bitty cubes, which is what I want. And I'll go ahead and I'm going to dice up this portion by itself just because it was getting a little too tiny for my comfort there. Turn it this way. Now, you can actually see that this is kind of tough to cut through. If you cut through the fleshy side of the tomato instead of the skin side, look how much easier that is to cut. So instead of, risking slipping there, go ahead, just flip that tomato over if you're having that kind of issue. And there we go. So I'm going to go ahead and move this to a bowl. I'm gonna go give my cutting board a quick rinse just to get some of this tomato juice off. Okay, so there's our tomato. Next up, we're going to be doing an onion. Now, onions are one of those things that you either you know how to cut them or you don't. So the way that you are supposed to cut an onion, if you do it correctly, it'll actually dice itself based on the way the layers are set inside the onion. So what you want to do is you want to find your end with the roots, right? So I like to think of it this way. Just like you don't want to cut off the roots of your family, you don't want to cut off the roots of your onion, right? So go ahead. This is the root end, so we're going to cut off the opposite end. Go ahead and slice straight through that. Now you can see I actually did not peel the skin off yet. I'm going to do that in a moment. Now what I've done here is I've given myself a nice flat side on my onion, and that's going to stop it from rolling around. Next up, we're going to chop. Now be careful doing this. We're going to cut our onion in half. So what I've done is I've cut straight through the root end now. I'm going to go ahead and remove some of this peel here that's kind of getting in my way. And now we have 2 halves of an onion with these little ends on them. So now is actually the portion where I go ahead, I peel off the outermost layer. Set that to the side. So next up, we're going to be making some little lines. So I'm going to point the end that's been chopped here to you. Now, whenever I do this, I'm not chopping all the way through. So I want to keep the root end intact. So I'm going to put the tip of my knife on the cutting board, and I'm just going to do some little lines. Now notice I am not going all the way through the onion. I'm just going as far back as I can without quite cutting through it. Next, we're going to make a cut this way. So just do a quick swipe through the middle of your onion. And last but not least, we're going to take it and just start chopping like this. And what you're going to see happen, do you see all these little bitty pieces that are actually coming off this onion? So look here, it may fall apart in chunks like this, but once you start to break it apart, look what happens. Do you see the little bitty pieces? Personally, I find this so much quicker and easier to do than dicing it. Some people, you know, they might not want to fool with it. They might just want to dice it the way they've been doing it for years. That's fine too. Me personally, I find this faster. I've been doing this for years. It's just, you know, once you know how to do it, it's quick and easy. So we're only going to be using half the onion in this recipe here, and I'm going to go ahead and move that to our bowl. So you can see our little bitty, some of these pieces might look bigger, but once you start to crack them apart, they're little bitty shreds. Okay, next up we're going to be doing our dressing. So here I have the bowl that I'm going to be putting our dressing into. So the recipe calls for 1/3 cup of low-fat mayonnaise. So I have my mayonnaise here. I have my 1/3 cup measuring, and I'm just going to take a spoon, and I'm going to go ahead and make sure that this is filled up to the top. So you can see here I actually have a little bit extra, so I'm going to go ahead and rake that back off. So there's our leveled cup of mayonnaise. And go ahead, scrape that down into the bowl. Okay, next up we have 1/4 cup of ketchup. So once again, just going to grab my ketchup here. I'm going to give it a good shake because we all know how ketchup gets. I've got my 1/4 cup. And we're just going to once again make sure we get a nice leveled off thing here in our measuring cup. So there is our ketchup. I'll go ahead and use the same, we're going to be mixing this anyway, so I'll use the same spoon to rake this off. Alright, so that's the mayonnaise, the ketchup. Next up we have 1 tablespoon of olive oil. So I'll grab my olive oil. Looks like this is a brand new thing of olive oil. That up. Let's see. 1 tablespoon. Pour that in there. It also calls for a 1/2 tablespoon of apple cider vinegar. A 1/4 teaspoon of salt. So here, salt, just a little bit. Now, if you don't end up having a 4th teaspoon, I know actually the set I have at home does not have this, you know, just do a pinch of salt. And a 4th teaspoon of sugar. Here's my sugar, dump that in there. Okay, so I'm just gonna take the spoon that I was using earlier, and I'm gonna go ahead and stir this up really nice. Okay, so there is our sauce. It's ready for our salad. Set that to the side. Next up, we're gonna be actually preparing our salads. Okay, now we're ready for the part that we've all been waiting for, the actual salad itself. So I'm going to take this lettuce that we chopped up earlier. Just give ourselves a nice little bowl down here. There's our salad. Next up, we need to put our tomato down here. Just gonna do a nice little bed of tomatoes there. A little bit of our onions. Alright, next up, now this recipe does call for cheese. Keep in mind, cheese does have a lot of fat in it. You don't want to overdo it on the cheese. So make sure we just do a nice little bit, just right there on top. That should do it. We're going to take 3 of the burger patties that we made earlier. So 1, 2, 3. And last but not least, we're going to be taking the sauce that we made. Just drizzle a little bit of sauce on top. Okay, and there you have it. That is our burger bowl. That's it for our burger bowl. So as you can see, that really was not difficult to make. I have tasted this before. It is very delicious. The ingredients are very cheap to make, and honestly, it's very filling. This is probably what I'm going to be eating for my lunch today. Now remember, if you're watching this and you don't have one of these, please contact your local extension office. So this is the 2021 edition of our NEP calendar. This is where these recipes are coming from that we're going to be cooking each month of this year. So as you can see here, this was January's The Burger Bowl. Anyway, if you have any questions, feel free to contact me or your local FCS extension agent. Until next time, see ya.